So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Sports Channel to Kate Baker. How are you, Kate?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thanks. I'm sitting on a sailboat on the ocean, and it looks like you're sitting in a forest somewhere today.
Yes, I love my plants. My unit's covered in plants.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us on the Global Sports Channel, and you are one of the pioneering guests, as you know. We're going to be launching on October the 23rd. We're extremely excited about that. You're actually the third guest that I've interviewed for the show, and woe and behold, another person who I interviewed was from the United Kingdom as well. So you guys are taking over the Global Sports Channel already.
Go us.
She was Scottish though, so I'll just remind you of that.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. United Kingdom, we're all united.
Yeah, you are, until you're divided, right?
That's it, yeah.
Look, what I do on all my shows is I offer the guest an opportunity to dedicate the show to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
Oh. Well, that's put me on the spot.
You've got to choose the right person.
Yeah, I do. Can I just dedicate it to all of my family and friends?
Yeah, of course
and then
you
I'm
can.
not missing anybody out.
Of course.
Yeah, I think I have a fantastic support network, and I wouldn't be the person that I am without all of my family and all of my friends and all the support and the love that they give me, especially because the majority of them are still in England. So yes, thank you all to them.
Well, let's talk about that. That's probably a good place to start, because it was when you were a young tacker that you got into sport, right? So it was when all those family members were around you. How old were you, and what sports did you start off with?
Well, to everybody's amusement, because I am the least delicate person ever, my first sporting adventures were in ballet.
Ballet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In the town that I lived in, there was a really big ballet school, and pretty much all the girls and some of the boys all went to ballet, and I'm pretty sure I started ballet about age 3.
Wow.
Yes. And then from ballet, that was kind of just a short few years, and then I got into a little bit of tennis. But mainly about age 7 started judo. Okay.
And let's go back to the ballet, because I'm fascinated. You know, a lot of people don't understand how tough ballet actually is, right? It's a very, very tough sport. So you did it, 4 years basically?
Yeah, I would say about that, 3 or 4 years, yes.
And what made you want to get away from ballet? Was there a reason why you wanted to leave it behind?
I guess I was probably the child with the muddy knees and wanted to be outside, and, wasn't very delicately jumping across the ballet floor, and was more a bit of a jump and a stomp. So I'm not sure that it really fitted my personality too well.
Okay, fair enough. And then you got into judo after that. That's a pretty tough thing. And what was the decision? Did you have a role model or an icon or somebody that you got into judo?
Well, classic for all English children growing up, I was watching Blue Peter.
Right.
And they had a section of the show where they showcase different things, I guess, every show. And one particular show I was watching, they had judo on there, and they had all the little children running around doing judo and putting on a show. And I turned around to my mum and I said, I'd like to give that a go.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and my mum has always been super pro, sport, and supporting me in anything that I wanted to do, sport or not. So she went the next day and researched what judo clubs were in our area, and I'm pretty sure the next week we were going along to a couple to have a look and just sit and see what it was like. And it all grew from there.
Wow, brilliant. We have a few things in common, I found out, because I've spent a lot of time in Milton Keynes over the years, and that's where you're from, right?
It sure is the land of concrete cows and roundabouts.
I was going to say roundabouts. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
my fondest memory is of Milton Keynes. It raining every day and the roundabout chaos.
Oh, yeah, look, I don't remember the rain, but learning to drive there is great because you learn roundabouts very, very quickly.
And they're massive, aren't they? They're massive roundabouts. Like, they're really big roundabouts.
Yeah, some of them are very large.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, back onto sports. So you did what most young people do, is put your hand into a number of different sports and try them out. Was there anything that kind of stuck out where you wanted to get a bit serious?
The judo, so I did judo from 7 to about 17.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that was my passion. That was my world, and I made a lot of very good friends through that and during that time.
Cool. And what about the difficult side of judo? Did you find that you were at disadvantage being a woman in terms of, or being a young girl, I guess, in terms of those stages, or did you mainly fight against other girls?
Early on, when you're younger, you would fight against actually, in the club situation, not competitions, but in the club situation, you would fight boys and girls through my whole time. And it's something that I've been reflecting on recently, actually. I think the gender in sport questions come up quite a lot recently. And I was reflecting the other day on it, and I thought, do you know what? It was so good that in judo, there was never any, you're a girl, you do this, you're a boy, you do that. It's all, everybody does everything. If this person's got to do 50 sit-ups, everybody does 50 sit-ups. And I think that gave me, I just didn't know any different. I went through life thinking, I'm a girl, they're a boy, we can do the same thing. There was no, I can't do that because I'm a girl. So I have to really credit my coach, for taking that approach.
It's a very interesting topic, and it's something that we're going to be focusing a lot on the Global Sports Channel, and talking to not only athletes but also those people in charge, so the representatives from the governing bodies. We're going to be talking a lot about equality in sport, and it's great to know people like your views on it. If I was to ask you the question, if we look at, so let's say, global tennis as a sport, and we've got the ATP Tour and the WTP Tour, what do you think should be happening there, as far as, do you think women should be playing the best of 5 sets in the Grand Slams like the men do, or do you think it's horses for courses still?
Look, I'm not educated in that specific argument whatsoever, so I'm sure the female and male tennis players will be far better to answer that. Yeah, I'll probably leave it at that. I'm not educated enough to make a call.
Okay, I've got to get you off the fence somehow. So let's say you're a spectator. You watch sport. You watch sport on television. You watch tennis on television. Would you prefer to sit down watching a women's game go over the best of 5 sets for the Grand Slams, or do you think they've got it right now with the best of 3 sets?
Oh, look, if it's really engaging tennis, then I want it to go for as long as possible. Like, I'm the spectator. I'm there to enjoy the performance that these athletes are putting on. So yeah, the longer the better, I guess, until it comes to a clear winner. Okay,
so you would prefer the 5 sets if it was a great competition, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, like a lot of English people, you ended up in Australia, like a lot of them do. So tell us about that journey. What made you get over to Australia?
Well, I always wanted to go backpacking in New Zealand. So the opportunity came that I could go, and I had a very good friend from university who was in Brisbane at the time, and I thought, well, I'm going all the way to New Zealand, I may as well stop and see her and visit her on the way. So I'd organised to do that, went and spent time with her, ended up getting some work experience with the company that she worked for, and ended up meeting my now partner there. And it was quite amusing because, I mean, there was myself as the work experience person, my friend Rowena, who worked there, and then my partner Jay, who he worked there, and that was pretty much it. That was the three of us. And yes, the rest is history. I'm still here.
Did you get to New Zealand? That's the important question.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So,
it was nice to meet you, but I'm going to New Zealand. This was my plan, and I have a one-way ticket, so I don't know when I'll be back. But,
yeah,
you know, I'm doing this. So I spent 3 or 4 months backpacking around New Zealand by myself. I love walking and hiking and being in the outdoors, so I just did as many hikes and as many walks as I could, and really filled my cup up with my hiking.
Yeah.
And then I came back, went to stay with my friend again, and started seeing Jay, and I was like, oh, this could really be something. What do we do? And then we were like, oh, we'll just play it by ear. I've still got longer on my working holiday visa, so we just kept seeing each other, and we were like, oh, this could really be something. So I went away and I did my farm work, and that was an interesting experience.
Right, outback Australia?
Luckily not too outback. I did, 6 weeks of avocado packing in Childers. I did a couple of weeks on a cattle farm in Millmerran.
Mm-hmm.
And then I spent a fantastic few months, I have to say, on a sheep farm, also in Millmerran. Absolutely once-in-a-lifetime experience, which I will always be grateful for the Bellevue Dorpers for having me.
Right.
They just took me in as one of their own, and had fantastic time driving quad bikes around, moving sheep, going and showing sheep at the regional show. We took the rams down to Dubbo and
fantastic.
Won awards down there, and I just had the best time.
You've done a lot of things that most Aussies wouldn't get to do, so that's a good thing. Now, for people watching and listening around the world today, those place names that Kate just shared with us, I'll just say simply they're rural Australia, and they're away from the main cities that you've probably heard about. But I want to go back to God's own country, New Zealand, because that's where I'm from, and I want to know about some of the amazing places you went to. Did you walk the Milford Track? Did you do that one?
I didn't do the Milford, but I tried to stay away from the more touristy ones. So I did now you're testing my memory. This is about 8 years ago now. The Kepler.
Kepler, okay, yep.
Yeah, I did I actually spent a couple of weeks volunteering in the Kepler. And doing environmental education camps, working with some of the local schools there in, you'll get this pronunciation better than myself, but Tianu.
Tianu, yes, not bad,
yeah.
Pretty good. Yep.
Yeah, so some of the local schools there, I helped and took them on camp in the Kepler Forest, which was really fun, and we did lots of environmental-based activities, so we got up early and listened to the bird songs in the morning and tracked them back to which birds they were and the native habitat that they live in. We also did a lot of animal tracking, so we made little tunnels and put ink, paper down and peanut butter in there, and then put them down one day, and then the next morning we would go back and look at the prints the animals had made when they'd walked to the peanut butter over the ink and then walked off the paper. And then you could do animal tracking.
Brilliant. You got me at the peanut butter stage. I was already in there.
Yeah, it wasn't too much of that to spare. It all went for the animals. But
so overall impression of the amazing country of New Zealand?
Oh, I loved it. I really loved it. I loved the people, so friendly, very welcoming. I loved the outdoor lifestyle, and the scenery is just incredible.
Now, like I used to be a sweet tooth person, so you probably dived into the hokey pokey ice cream and the buzz bars and all those things. Did you get all those things on your trip?
No,
You didn't?
I didn't.
Oh.
I did get into the Whittaker's chocolate though.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's a good substitute. Yep.
Didn't miss out.
Okay, good. Well, you've got to go back again, because if you haven't had hokey pokey ice cream, although you can get it in Australia, but you've got to go back and have it in New Zealand. We're going to talk about stand-up paddleboarding a bit today, because I'm not a tourist show for New Zealand anymore. I've got to focus on sports nowadays. So let's talk about stand-up paddleboarding. What got you into that sport? What was the story behind that?
My partner Jay, when I met him, he paddled. Going back to my work experience when I first got here, he used to walk in the office with his ginormous paddle. He's 6'5", and back then paddles were taller than you are. Like, that was the technique and the way the paddles were made. So yeah, he used to come in the office with this massive paddle, and I was like, this is all very strange. And anyway, he got me hooked, basically.
Sounds like it. Not only on
yeah,
paddleboarding.
Yes. So yeah, I started paddling with him, and then I think the first Christmas we were together, maybe, or the second, he bought me a second-hand paddleboard. And then I ended up joining the local Brisbane club, where there were some very enthusiastic members. Fantastic guy called Nick McDonald, who drove the club forward and ran lots of really fun, friendly local events in the local off the local beaches here in Brisbane, and that's how I started.
Brilliant. So for someone out there listening today who hasn't even tried paddleboarding, stand-up paddleboarding, how difficult is it to get used to, in terms of, did you fall off the first time you tried to get on the board?
I was very lucky that I tried on a very wide, stable board the first time. So I think that helped me get into it. If I'd fallen off for the whole hour I first tried it, I probably wouldn't have done it anymore. Look, it's like everything. If you choose the wrong conditions and you choose the wrong equipment, it's going to be hard. But if you choose a day where it's not windy and you're not on a body of water that has crazy currents, and you get a board that's nice and wide and stable, it's not hard.
Did you know anything about the sport at all before you met your partner? Have you been stand-up paddleboarding before?
I had. My mum and my stepdad actually had paddle boards. They bought them just after I left for Australia, though. They didn't want me using them, clearly. But I had, so I tried it once or twice, but certainly nothing, just a quick 10-minute go.
Yeah, okay. So it wasn't until you met your partner that you kind of got into it. Did you kind of get a bit of a serious appetite for it after you got into it? Did you kind of fall in love with it?
I fell in love with being on the water, definitely. And it was, for me, the first sport where I had the opportunity to spend time and be on the water. Yeah.
Is it a sport that you've got to be very fit to be enjoying?
No. No, you could be not fit at all and still enjoy it. You just cruise around at your own pace and have fun.
So how did you transition from that kind of recreational paddleboarder to wanting to be competitive with it? And how do you find out about that? Like, the club that you joined, did they have competitive angles as far as races and stuff go?
I guess I've always been into sport, so I've always had a competitive nature. So I remember the first race, paddleboard race that I did at this local club. There was this one lady in front of me, and I was just going hell for leather to try and catch her. I had no idea what I was doing, but just paddling as fast as I could. Like, I want to get in front. So I guess I've always had that. In terms of how my paddling journey, I guess, came about, it was all very natural. It was never, I want to be the best at this, or when I started, I certainly didn't know that there was national level racing, let alone international level racing. So I just kept doing my club events, doing more and more of those, and then I started to hear about some training crews on the Gold Coast who were very competitive, and so I went to one of them and I said, can I train with you? I'd like to get better, or I'd like to push myself. And they said, sure, come along. And so I trained with them for a while, and then there was another training group who had a female in it, Angie Jackson, and at the time and still is one of the top ranked female paddleboarders in the world. And I thought, oh well, if I want to be the best I can be, then I should be training alongside her and seeing what the gap is between myself and Angie. And I was incredibly lucky that Ange and her husband Paul took me on and was like, sure, come train with us. And there was no kind of, there was basically, they took me on and just nurtured me and said, you know, you can do this, we can do that, look at technique. And they just helped me grow. And one of the other people there, Steve, as well, spent a lot of time with me working on my technique, and then starting to think about the tactic side of paddling as well, and just opened up whole new doors to me of national level racing. So then I started doing some national level races, and I definitely was not up there at all, right in the back half of the field at all times. But just kept training over the years, just kept plugging away, training hard, looking at my technique. Jay, my partner, spent a lot of time analysing some of the top paddlers and their technique and style, and then looking at my paddling stroke and seeing, you know, if we change this, if we tweak that, does that make you go faster? Is it more efficient? It just all developed from there.
Yeah, brilliant. Lots of questions as a result of what you just shared with us. So if we go back to when you started doing the club races, for someone listening who's a novice at this and doesn't understand the world of stand-up paddle boarding, what kind of distance do you paddle over in a novice kind of weekend club hit-out type of race?
Yeah, so I would say it's generally around about the 5 kilometre mark.
Okay, and we're talking open water, or are we talking in a lake, or what?
The ones in Brisbane were all open water, but fairly protected open water. So you would start on the beach, you'd run into the water with your board, jump on your board, generally paddle around some markers, and then come back into the beach, and then run up the beach with your paddle, and whoever crosses the line first wins.
Okay, simple as that. And when you started focusing on technique and things, I'm really interested, because a part of our show going forward is going to be talking about people that have obviously made it to world championship level and gold medal levels at Olympics and that. And I just had a guest on the other day actually who won a silver medal at the Olympics, and she held several world records, and she was saying that over the years it was all about the hard work she was putting in. It was all about the miles she was running, in her case, because she was a runner. And it took years and years and years of just building her body up and understanding what her body was capable of doing. Have you felt the same thing as you've learned more and more techniques with stand-up paddleboarding to make it easier?
Absolutely. The kilometres paddled has a substantial difference. I think they generally say it takes about 3 years of paddling to really bed in your technique and get comfortable with paddling. And I guess just train your body, get those muscles that you need, and you start and you do a 45-minute paddle, say, and, you know, your heart rate can be absolutely through the roof, and, you know, then a couple of years later you could do that same pace and your heart rate's just at a medium level, and it's just that training.
Okay. So when you went from, your beginner status to learning more about the technique, what were some of the actual techniques that you did learn? For instance, what were you doing wrong in your paddling technique?
Oh, pretty much everything. There was a lot of being too just going hell for leather, getting the paddle in any way, shape or form, rather than actually relaxing and trying to only use certain muscle groups to be more efficient and conserve energy. I guess another key one for people that are paddling now that might want to try and improve is not getting the whole depth of the blade in the water. A lot of people only tend to put like a little bit of the blade in and don't fully submerge the blade, and you don't get that resistance to be able to drive yourself forward. Another one is a lot of people kind of think about pulling backwards rather than the paddle being stuck and trying to pull forwards off the paddle.
Right, okay, yeah.
Some of the really key changes that I made.
So how quickly did you start to see the results changing once you started to learn some of these things?
I probably couldn't put a time frame on it. I mean, these were changes that I made over the course of years. So there was no instant, this is better than that.
So you didn't go from midfield to podium finishes within a weekend or something?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay.
I would say the biggest difference for me in my paddling, and probably shifted me from that mid-pack in Australia to that top level, was starting to do some weights. Starting to think holistically about my training and how it impacted my paddling. So a lot of the time I, ran because I liked running and it kept me fit, and I did a cycle and I did yoga and whatever. And I started working with a company called Inspire Health Services, who I'm incredibly grateful for all of their support over the years. I think I've been training there for possibly 4 or 5 years now. And we started to look at my training, and James, there's an exercise scientist who does all my programming, and we sat down and we went, okay, well, instead of just doing random things like running and paddling, let's make everything work together as one plan, and have your running, do intervals or do things that will help reach the goals of your paddling. So I left it all in his very capable hands, and he still does my programming on and off the water currently. And that was what made the biggest difference, having a plan and having everything work to the same goal and starting to do weights. I'd never walked in a gym to lift weights in my life before 4 years ago, and I'd say that's made a really big difference for me.
Yeah, really interesting, and I think critical in making sure that your training portfolio is very diverse in terms of getting lots of different disciplines into, get the core stronger, to get the body stronger, and all these other, and flexible as well. You talked about yoga. Having flexibility in any sport is critical, right? And this is from someone that has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, but we won't talk about that.
No, it is. I mean, all your high impact activity shorten your muscles, and so you need to do something to oppose that, to lengthen them out and try and keep them the same length. Otherwise, if you're just constantly running and paddling and going hard, you're going to end up injuring yourself.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people listening won't understand the kind of way that the stand-up paddleboarding sport as a whole is set up from a structural point of view. Now, you talked earlier about competing in the nationals and going to that level. How does that come about? How can anybody just get to a level and go, okay, I'm going to compete in the nationals this year, or do you have to qualify? What's the process behind that?
Yeah, so there is a rough structure. Stand-up paddleboarding is a little bit different. It actually has there's not one united governing body. There's lots of different organisations. But in terms of going to nationals, yes, there's a state level qualification. You have to come top 2 in the state, male or top 2 female, and then from there you can go to nationals. And from nationals they'll take the top 2.
Okay, understood. Now, when you get to national level, are the races the same over 5 kilometre distances, or are they a variety of different distances?
There are 2 main types of races when you get to national level. You have the surf style race, and then you have the marathon race. So marathon race is generally an 18 kilometre race in open water.
18 k's. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's a long slog, that one.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, how long does that take to you paddle 18 k's?
Probably about, I'd like to say 2 hours, probably about 2 hours 10 minutes, 2 hours 15 minutes.
Well, that's a big workout for the core, isn't it, when you're standing up pumping away for 2 hours and 10 minutes on a board?
Yeah, it's a lot of work for a lot of muscles, yes.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so that's, again, open water for 18 kilometres. And is it generally an out and back course, or is it a loop course?
Oh, it can be anything. In Queensland, we're lucky to have a fantastic stretch of ocean, so we generally tend to start from a place called Snapper Rocks, and then we'll go all the way to Currumbin, and then sometimes we go in through the surf up Currumbin Creek, which is a big creek, and then round a buoy at the end, and then back up the creek and finish. Okay.
You must love it out here, because you don't have to wear a wetsuit that's about 6 millimetres thick like you would in the UK, right, to go stand-up paddleboarding?
Yes, yeah, I do feel sorry for anybody that has to paddle in a wetsuit, all that neoprene around your shoulders when you're trying to paddle, and yeah.
I used to be a triathlete, and I used to hate wearing a wetsuit in the swim, and even though it did give you a bit of buoyancy advantage, it was just terrible from that rubbing point of view. It doesn't matter how much Vaseline or lubrication stuff you put on, you still got out with problems going on. Anyway, that was another lifetime. So you get up to national level, so you did pretty well because you went from state level to national level, and then did you have a grander ambitions to get overseas and compete from there?
I did, and I've never competed at the World Championships at international level, although I have qualified. Because of being English and at the time wasn't a citizen in Australia, I couldn't go to Worlds and represent Australia, but I also couldn't afford to fly back to England to compete in their nationals to be able to get my spot to be able to go to Worlds.
Oh, that must have killed you. You qualified for the World Champs and you couldn't go.
Yeah, for so many years in a row.
Oh, no.
But
are you an Aussie citizen yet?
I am, as of January this year.
Okay, and now you can't travel anywhere.
That's it, exactly. But luckily, that's just one race, Worlds on the racing calendar, and actually there's probably, because countries can only take top 2, there's actually a lot more prestigious races internationally, I'd say, that you could go to, although you don't get the World Championship status. That it's a lot harder race and it's more prestigious because there's no cap on how many from each country can go.
Okay.
So you could have the top, anybody can turn up, but, if you take Australia here, for example, you've got Angie Jackson, you've got Taryn, you've got Carla, amazing female paddlers, but only 2 of those would be able to go to Worlds. Yet another international event, all of them could go, as well as myself.
Yeah,
So you
right.
get a lot more of a hard competition.
So it's a bit like the triathlon scene when it comes to, if you've got 5 athletes from a country that are really good, they can go and all try and qualify for a Kona at the World Championships and all that sort of stuff. There's no limit there. It's all based on time and stuff like that. So is there a global paddling league as such where you go from place to place and compete?
Um, there's a league, and there are several different world tours, which is why I said there's lots of different organisations and people running world tours. But to be honest, a lot of them are just individual people who put a lot of hard work and a lot of time into setting up an event and running an event. And they're just standalone events. They don't feed into world tours or anything specific. So yeah, they're just events that are scattered all around the world that you get the opportunity to go to.
So is it fair to say, and I'm not being critical when I say this, I'm kind of trying to understand the evolution of the sport, is it kind of disorganised when it comes to that whole global federation thing that doesn't exist today? Or?
In terms of organisation of races, yes, I would say that it is fairly disorganised. There's lots of different figureheads and lots of different races, and it's not necessarily all neat and tidy like some far more mature and sports that have been around a long time. I do have to give one person, Chris Parker, a massive shout out and here, because Chris has tried to and made big improvements in providing organisation for our sport. So he is just an individual, and he has set up world rankings, and he sits there and he looks at what races there are and how many people are going to them, and allocates points available for each race for all of the different races, and then whoever wins gets points, and that gets tallied into a league and a world rankings. So if it wasn't for him, it would be far more disorganised, and he's brought the sport together.
Okay, so that's really interesting that a individual can actually set up world rankings. I've actually got some history in that space, but I won't go into it. But it's quite interesting that it hasn't been ratified by a governing body, or a governing body hasn't been set up to ratify those world rankings. Is that correct or not?
Well, there's 2 governing bodies in the mix that both share stand-up paddle boarding now. They were in Olympic arbitration for the last year or so. So the Surfing Federation and the Canoe Federation are both lay claim to stand-up paddleboarding, and I think that's where the disorganisation has come from.
Okay, I understand. There's politics involved again.
There's a lot of politics, yes. And I am not privy to a lot of it. I am just a racer who turns up and races. But I'm very grateful for Chris and a lot of the people, behind the scenes that put in the world rankings, in their own time to try and corral our sport into a certain direction.
Yeah, fantastic. Good on you, Chris. Good stuff. And it's always great to have people like you in any sport that are trying to make it better and bigger. I've got a few friends that might be watching and listening to this show today who are global philanthropists who might want to throw and invest some serious money into the sport of stand-up paddleboarding to help them organise a global federation. So you know who I'm talking about here, and I'm looking at you guys in the eyes. So if you've got a desire after listening to Kate today and her journey, reach out to me and let me know, and we'll put you in touch with the right people. Kate, tell us a little bit more about your journey. So when was the first overseas race that you went and competed in?
My first overseas race was in Japan, and Ange and Paul Jackson were going, and I was training with them at the time, and they said, "Why don't you come?" And I said, "Me? Like, no, like, I'm not at a level to come." And they're like, "You are. Come with us. We've got a spare room, or you can crash on the floor. Like, just come with us." And there was a whole group of Aussies going, and I went over with them. And I nearly caused a major upset.
Oh.
Ange won. Did Ange or Fiona won first and second? And then there's a fantastic American paddler called Candice Appleby, who was, right up there in the world at the time. And I finished only 3 seconds behind her.
Wow.
Yeah, I caught her up in the last lap and so close to beating her.
So tell us, what was the distance of that race?
I think that was probably about a 10-kilometre race.
10K, okay. So that was a sprint then, wasn't it? 10Ks.
Well, yeah, it doesn't feel like it when you're at 9 kilometres, that's for sure. You don't have much left in the tank.
No, I bet I was being a smart bum. So let's talk about the logistics of getting everything overseas. How do you get these boards and everything to Japan? Like, you have to hire a charter an aircraft or what?
That is the hardest thing about our sport, is transporting 14-foot-long race boards on planes.
Yeah.
It is not easy, and we have always tried to fly Virgin, because big shout out to Richard Branson. I think he understood what it was like to try and travel with sports equipment, and was the only airline that enabled us to take boards. Other airlines, you would offer to pay, like you would ring them ahead of time. This is the length, how much would it cost me to send it? And they either say no or they say yes, and you get there on the day and they reject you. I've been, in 2018 when I went and did the European tour, I was at the airport checking in and they refused to take my board. And I'm like, but I've got a whole month of races in Europe. Like, what do I do without a board? Like, I can't not take a board. And they're like, well, sorry, we don't have enough space anymore. We can't take your board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, incredibly lucky to represent the One brand, which is what Angela and Paul Jackson have developed. They were racers, and then they've now developed their own brand of paddle boards.
Right.
And I'm a team rider for them, One Ocean Sports. And they were having boards shipped direct to Europe, and they said, we'll work it out. We've got 4 boards. There's 4 of us riders. Hopefully some of the races, the men will race at separate times to the women, and we'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Okay.
And we did, but it would have been a nightmare if that hadn't have been the case. 3-4 months of just such hard training, giving absolutely everything, getting my nutrition on point, doing everything I could to then get to the airport and then be like, oh, we can't take your board.
Yeah, amazing. So it's really great that you share this, because, competing in a sport around the world is not as easy as some people think that it is. And there's a lot of different things that you need to think about, whether it be jet lag and overcoming jet lag when you arrive at a destination. If you're across time zones, it's about nutrition and making sure that you can get the food that you're used to having when you're in a strange country and you can't read the labels and everything else, to getting your equipment there on time. And it just so happens, you might not know this about me, but I spent a couple of decades working for the world's largest logistics company, and they carry today all the Formula One cars around the world for the Formula One series on their aircraft. And we should have a chat after this about that, because I'm sure they can help you out with your logistics in the future, and everybody else that travels too. Yeah. So really interested to hear also about sponsorship. You've talked a couple of times now about company names that have come on board to support you. It sounds to me as though they were through word of mouth and people that you knew and started to develop networks with. Has it been easy to get sponsorship? Have you gone actively out to pursue other sponsorships?
I'm very lucky that I've worked with Inspire for a long time, and Inspire have a holistic health point of view. So James heads up my programming as my exercise scientist, but they also have nutritionists and physiotherapists in-house. And so James sets my program for the month, goes to the nutritionist goes, okay, so this training load this month, this week, you need a bit more that day, a bit less that day, I've worked with a few of them now. They know what foods I like. They know to put peanut butter on my food for my morning tea, snack, and, and so I get a holistic program from them. And I wouldn't want to work with anybody else. They've just been incredible and supported me over the years through absolutely everything. And I couldn't recommend having that holistic look at what you're doing more highly. Like, you could be unfit and, the most amateur person, and you want to get better. All you have to do is, go and see them. It's not just for the elite.
Yeah.
I think anybody who wants to improve in any kind of sport, if you get some kind of assistance from those experts, the people in the know, it's always going to be a constructive use of your time and money.
Yeah, good point.
So,
do you want to be professional? Do you want to be doing this full time?
There isn't this money in the sport. There's nowhere near enough money in the sport to be able to survive to do it professionally.
So what's holding back sponsors and investors coming into the sport from what you know of it? Because obviously there's all the global brands that are making these boards and paddles and everything else. It's a healthy sport. It's a sport that includes being in the environment in a healthy way, where you're not using motor engines and diesel fuel and everything else like that. So to me, it sounds like it's a very attractive proposition for sponsors to come in and get behind it. Why hasn't that happened? Is it because it's just such a new sport?
It's gone through phases. At the beginning, there was a lot of money and there was a lot of brands making boards and selling boards, but actually the market contracted slightly and there aren't that many brands that make boards. There's maybe 10 or so that make the really high quality race boards, and they can't afford to pay large amounts of money to fly athletes around the world to attend events, let alone a salary on top of that. So it would really be looking for sponsorship externally from associated sports, I guess, brands to try and support the industry, and if you wanted to be professional, to support you. It's certainly not something that I have pursued. I find it very difficult to promote myself. I'm just doing what I love and minding my own business, and I'd much prefer to fly under the radar and turn up to an event and do better than I expected, and I'm happy to be like that, and I'm incredibly lucky that my sponsors support me to be like that. And the One Ocean Sports, I get to, ride their boards, which are absolutely incredible boards. And again, I wouldn't want to switch to a different type of board. Like Ange and Paul and Steve put so much time researching, and Benny, the designer who designs them, they live and breathe the sport. So you're not going to get any better boards.
Is there a lot of competition coming along from, we're seeing, you and I met at the beach when you were doing kite foiling or whatever it was. What was the correct name of what you were trying to do that day?
Wing foiling.
Wing foiling. Okay. So
yes.
There's lots of competition coming on where we see, electric wing foils. We see the manual ones. We see a lot of electric motors now being put on, even on bicycles. I saw a Kiwi company the other day that's got this incredible electric bike that goes on water that you can ride for, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers on a lake with an electric motor in it, right? So it's got a propeller at the back and away you go. And you can go out there and you can ride 180 kilometers on the lake with this electric bike. So I can see that there's a lot of different competition coming along in water sports. Do you think that's something that's also limiting the growth and exposure of stand-up paddleboarding?
That's a really good question, and not something that I've really... I think in terms of your foiling and your wing foiling, the majority of people that are getting into those are people that have paddled and have those skills and are just looking to expand their skill set and challenge themselves with something new. I guess it depends. I mean, there's a lot of other water sports out there, but can you make them into some a competition, and can you make them into something that is attractive for people to watch? And
yeah,
there's a lot of different variables in there.
So the races that you've participated in overseas, have they been televised at all on television? Have they got any exposure at all?
Online, they certainly have, and in their local media. Some of the European events, they do a lot of work in trying to get them out and promote them and live stream the events as much as possible. And they certainly attract a lot of spectator crowds. I was in Bilbao in Spain in 2018, and we raced along past the Guggenheim, and you had just thousands of people lining the walls of the river, which was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so I think the future looks bright. It just needs to be organised in a way where investors can come in, some structural integrity put into the globalness of it, and you see people out there all the time on stand-up paddle boards, and I think if they started to have role models that are racing and becoming household names like we see in a lot of other sports, I think it's only a matter of time. COVID-19 came along, Kate, and kind of closed down the world, so you weren't being able to get that 14-foot board on a plane and head off somewhere. So how's that impacted your sport and your ambitions to get overseas and race?
Yeah, well, I was moving desks at work the other day to a different floor, and I was cleaning out my drawer, and I found a post-it note of that I must have written at the end of last year of everywhere I wanted to go this year, and the different races, and all the European races, and my stepsister's wedding in England, and my granddad's 90th birthday, and hiking in Patagonia with my amazing friend Rosie. And I thought, oh yeah, none of that's happening this year.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it's been a different year, but it's provided opportunities. It's provided a lot of opportunities for me to put a lot of time and focus back in my paddling, looking at technique again. Can I make changes, and looking at where are my weaknesses and how can I build on those to make them my strengths. And you don't get those opportunities when you're training to race, because you're only training for that race and to go faster. You don't get the downtime to be able to work on the backroom maintenance, as it were. So it's provided a great opportunity to do that. And it's also provided the opportunity to try new things, like we said, the wing foiling, where I met you, and also get into foiling in the surf as well. I'm trying my hand at that, and getting back into things that I really love. Like, I love to just surf, normal surf, not on a paddleboard or anything. So I've been able to get a little bit more surfing in as well. So it's good. So
when COVID goes away sufficiently enough for the borders to be opened again and everybody's back in the air, are you going to have plans to get back into the overseas competitions as soon as possible?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few races which are incredible races that I love going to. There's a race in on the Japanese island of Zamami. Amazing. You go and just the water is bright blue, crystal clear, stunning islands. To be able to go to places like that, and the local people are incredible, and the food is out of this world. That's one of the highlights. Yeah. The European stops, I absolutely love doing that, because they generally line races up back-to-back weekends. So like in 2018 we did I think we flew into France, did a race in France, then drove the next weekend, did a race in Germany, next weekend race in Spain. So that's a great experience, and you're almost on a tour and everybody's doing the same races, and you get to battle it out again. Each weekend, if somebody beat you, you're like, I'm going to get you back now. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of camaraderie when you're spending that much time, going from place to place together. Yeah, there is. And, there's a really fantastic group of females at that international level who really support each other and build each other up and encourage each other. And yeah, it's all bets are off on the water when you're racing. It's hell for leather and whatever, but generally there's no backstabbing, there's no bitchiness. It's all support and helping, and I was very surprised and happily surprised about that.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, before we wrap up today, I could talk to you for another couple of hours about stand-up paddleboarding, but before we wrap up today, someone's sitting out there listening and going, I'd like to give this a go. I've never done this before. Where do they go? How do they get involved? Where is the world of stand-up paddleboarding for people?
Oh, paddleboarding is far and wide now, which is so great to see. Google where your local hire shop is, pick a non-windy day, pick a nice flat body of water, go and hire a board for half an hour, go and have a play. It's a fantastic experience and so nice just to get out on the water, be active, move. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and it's great to do with friends and family, all ages, all abilities. Everyone can give it a go.
There you go. You're a fantastic ambassador for the sport of stand-up paddleboarding. And I'll tell you what, the Global Sports Channel is going to follow your journey because you're as humble as you are. You obviously have the ability to be one of the best in the world, and you already are. You've proven that by being in 4th position in Japan. So we're going to follow you intensely as you take on the world of stand-up paddleboarding and get you back on the show at a later date when you've been overseas again and competed in some of these races, because I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching today will want to watch and find out how Kate Baker has been going. So thanks, Kate, very much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.